Hey, welcome back to the Garden of English. I'm Tim Freitas. Here at the GOE, we fix problems.
I can fix it!
And the problem you all are having right now is producing killer thesis statements in response to your argument prompt. Sure, you've broken down the prompt, and sure, you've gotten a bunch of ideas to consider as you begin to create your essay, but now you need to actually generate not just a thesis, but a complex thesis that will project a line of reasoning that will help you map out the rest of your paper, score that thesis point, and rock your overall score on exam day. So, if you're on board with all this awesomeness I'm projecting right here, spank that like button and hit the subscribe so you never miss out on any of the other awesome tips that we have to offer. Speaking of subscribe, I wanted to just let you know about a little new GOE initiative. I love giving shoutouts in videos, so here's the deal. If you can get 15 kids in your class, or 60% of your class if there aren't 15 kids in it, to subscribe to the GOE, and you let me know in the comments right below this video, I'll give you a shoutout in the next GOE production. I hope to be dropping a lot of names of schools in the very near future. Anyway, back to argument thesis statements. PSA. If you didn't know, a thesis is a sentence that typically goes at the end of your introduction paragraph, and it clearly projects your argument. Moments ago, I mentioned that you need to generate a complex thesis statement that hopefully projects a line of reasoning as well. Well, before you can create such a thing, you need to know the definition of two elements of language that I just mentioned: line of reasoning and complex sentence. The AP English Language course and exam description doesn't even actually define what line of reasoning is, which is quite odd. But I'm going to do so now because it's going to help us on test day and in future argument videos when we discuss body paragraphing, evidence, and commentary. A line of reasoning is the complex interplay of how the thesis guides the topic sentences. Transitions interrelate the paragraphs. Topic sentences direct the evidence integration for the paragraph, and the commentary in some way consistently relates back to a unifying idea, message, or argument. Today, what we want to consider from that definition is the fact that a thesis guides other elements of the paper, and there's a unifying idea or argument. And this leads into the next term that you need to know, which is complex sentence. A complex sentence is a type of sentence that projects ideas, but does so in a way that presents some ideas as being of lesser value than other bigger or more important ideas. The way you create complex thesis statements, or complex sentences in general, is by including a subordinating conjunction. To create this complex thesis, you just need to generate a complex sentence in response to the prompt that you're engaging with. And the easiest way to do this is by making sure that your thesis includes a subordinating conjunction. Here's a list of some subordinating conjunctions right here. Now, of course I'm going to model what a complex thesis looks like for you in just a few moments. But I'd like to remind you of the prompt I'm writing an argument in response to. You know, it's the one we covered in our last video. I'm looking at the warning label prompt from the AMSCO book. It's gonna pop right up here on your screen just in case you forgot it. Okay, as I begin to generate my thesis, I want to remember that I've already developed a small argument here from when we broke down the prompt itself. No, when I originally broke down the prompt, I suggested that it's generally appropriate to apply warning labels to things. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to make my generic claim a more complex one. And I'm going to do so by putting it in a thesis template. On the screen, I'm going to show you 5 thesis templates that will guarantee that you have written a complex thesis, and they'll work for just about any argument prompt that you could possibly see. I want to point out a couple of things about the templates that you just saw. First, there's a file linked right below in the description that contains these. Second, I need you to notice that as the template number gets higher, the sophistication potential of the thesis increases as well. But if you try a more sophisticated template and you don't fully understand how it functions to direct your paper, you do run the risk of turning what could be an amazingly excellent paper into quite a piece of junk. So don't just go for the higher thesis number because you think it will automatically make you a better writer. You have to remember, in the famous words of Batman,
"It's not who I am underneath, but what I do that defines me."
The same goes with the thesis statement. Good intentions don't necessarily mean good execution. Third, you'll see that each statement is marked as either being opened or closed. All a closed thesis statement is a statement that really limits what your paper will talk about. In a closed thesis, you really don't have much wiggle room outside of what is listed in that language. You can't explore too much more in your paper. These types of thesis statements are great for high stress and time situations because they provide a solid reference point for you to return to if you get some writer's block. The open thesis still answers the prompt well, but doesn't limit the direction you can go as much and allows you to be much more well, open. Sure, you'll have to stay within the barriers of the argument that the thesis projects, but you have a wide open field of places to go before reaching the fence and the limitations of your argument itself. Open thesis statements are significantly better to use when writing longer papers. Now, am I encouraging closed over open on the exam day? It depends. You need to know what you need as a writer yourself. You have to be introspective. Do you like that rigid direction, or do you like a little added freedom? Whatever your preference, that's what you need to embrace. Okay, so now that I've covered all that, let's actually see some of these templates in action and discuss their qualities. Remember, all of these thesis statements are complex, but not all of them are nuanced. So let's start by taking a peek at what thesis statement 1 would look like if I wanted to complexly argue that warning labels are generally helpful and appropriate. Check out how I'd construct my thesis here. Placing cautionary labels and ratings on commonly agreed upon troubling content is appropriate because such markings allow others to freely choose what they'd like to experience, and they provide a way for guardians to protect their young from being exposed to overly mature content. This is a complex sentence, but notice how my argument is significantly one-sided. I'm only going to argue that placing warning labels on things is appropriate. And I'm going to provide body paragraphs that discuss examples of people freely choosing what they'd like to experience and examples of parents protecting their children. Since this is a closed thesis, I'm not going outside of the parameters listed after the word because. And let me be clear, this thesis can lead to a solid argument that could potentially score full marks on your AP Lang argument essay. But I want to contrast this thesis with a thesis that's created with template number 3. This is because thesis statement 3 develops nuanced complexity as it projects a concession that needs to be dealt with first, and it's an open thesis so I can go in many directions. Okay, so let's look at it and then let's chat about it. Here it is. Although many individuals can find just about any situation offensive, and it's incredibly unrealistic to apply warning labels to everything, placing cautionary labels and ratings on commonly agreed upon troubling content is appropriate. The way this thesis works is like this. It projects that at the beginning of my paper, I'm going to have to concede. That's just another word for admit something. What I'm conceding is that almost any situation can be found offensive, and it's unrealistic to mark everything because of this truth. You know that's true, I know it's true, just concede it. But my thesis then moves to project the crutch of my argument that warning labels are appropriate since there are some areas where troubling content is commonly agreed upon. So, once I admit my first concessionary point, I can then write about as many examples as I would like that prove people can commonly agree upon troubling content, and then explain how labels are appropriate in those circumstances. I could write one body paragraph about that, I could write 20. Because I start my concession with the word although, it subordinates that clause, and in doing so, automatically makes the beginning of the thesis hold less weight than my actual argument, which can be found in the second clause. My argument is highlighted because it's the main clause of the thesis, and I have now created a nuanced argument. And here's a tip. As a writer, if you could explore some nuance, you want to. But you also want to make sure that your stance is clear. So make sure you know what you're doing if you try using more advanced templates. The way I generated the concession part of my thesis was by going back to my planning guide that we looked at in my last video to see where I partially agreed or disagreed with positions or assumptions from the prompt. Then I just added those pieces into the concessionary part of my thesis template. That's why planning is so important. My entire complex thesis was generated from only my planning, and my planning took about 4 or 5 minutes. Here are some more example theses for each of the templates that I've provided for you. Each one is strong in its own way, but knowing how to write a thesis isn't going to always earn you the highest marks, because the most points you can get are in row B of the AP Lang rubric. So, I'm glad you know how to practice writing awesome thesis statements, but now you need to know how to generate everything else that goes into creating a strong line of reasoning. Strong topic sentences, transitions, evidence, and commentary. Fortunately for you, I have all the tips and tricks that you need to learn and master for these tasks, and you can find out how to do all of this by clicking right over here.